My name is Lena Vance, and for most of my 36 years, I have lived my life as a reflection in other people's eyes. First, as the daughter of Arthur and Beatrice Sterling, a role that came with a script written in the ink of expectation and bound in the leather of tradition. Then, as the wife of Julian Croft, a part one played so well for over a decade that I almost forgot the woman who existed before the curtain rose. My life, until recently, was a landscape shaped by the gravitational pull of my family, a world where the paths were paved with their approval and the destinations chosen for me. I never imagined that the person to hand me a compass and show me how to navigate by my own stars would be my quiet, watchful 16-year-old daughter, Clara. I grew up in the misty, evergreen embrace of Port Blossom, Oregon, a city that sits nestled between rolling hills and the wide, steady flow of the Willamette River. Our family name, Sterling, was as solid and enduring as the old-growth forests my father's company, Sterling Timber and Land, had built its empire upon. Arthur Sterling was a man carved from the very timber he sold, strong, unyielding, and with a vision that always looked toward legacy and expansion. My mother, Beatrice, was the master gardener of our social standing, cultivating relationships with the same meticulous care she gave her prize-winning rhododendrons, ensuring every bloom was perfectly placed and no weed of impropriety dared to sprout. In their world, love was a currency earned through achievement. It was the approving nod when I was accepted into a prestigious university, the proud smile when I landed a respectable internship, and the grand, public celebration when I married Julian Croft. Julian was, in their eyes, the perfect merger. The son of one of my father's oldest associates, he was handsome, ambitious, and moved through their world with an easy confidence that I had always struggled to feign. For 12 years, I poured myself into being the woman I thought he, and by extension my parents, wanted me to be. I hosted the dinner parties, chaired the charity committees, and smoothed over the silences that grew wider and deeper between us as Julian became more distant, more critical, more of a stranger in our sprawling, Tudor-style home. The end came not with a bang, but with the quiet discovery of a second life he was leading with Tessa, a bright-eyed young woman from his marketing department. The implosion of my marriage felt like a clear-cutting of my own soul. The divorce was a bitter, protracted affair that left the landscape of my life barren. I was left with my 2 children, Clara, my perceptive, old soul of a daughter, and 8-year-old Leo, my sweet boy with a heart as open as a summer sky. Our world shrank dramatically. We traded the Tudor home with its manicured lawns for a small, 2-bedroom rental with a perpetually damp basement in a quieter part of Port Blossom. My art, a passion for ceramics that I had relegated to a hobby, became a lifeline. I set up a makeshift studio in the chilly garage, the scent of wet clay and earthy glazes filling the air as I tried to piece together a new life, a new income, and a new sense of self. I took a part-time job managing a local artisan co-op, my days a patchwork of packing online orders, negotiating with suppliers, and trying to find time for freelance projects. To my surprise, my parents seemed to rally. The phone calls, once reserved for holidays and birthdays, became a weekly occurrence. Gifts arrived for the children, expensive gadgets, and designer clothes I could no longer afford. Sunday dinners at their grand home overlooking the river became a standing invitation. I clung to this renewed attention like a sapling in a storm, grateful for the support, believing that perhaps, finally, they saw me and not just the disappointing reflection of a failed marriage. Only Clara remained unconvinced. She would sit at their vast, polished dining table, a quiet observer in a sea of polite conversation. "They look at you differently now, Mom," she told me one evening, her voice low as we washed dishes in our cramped kitchen. "It's like you're a project. A Sterling property that's fallen into disrepair and needs to be managed back to its former value." I dismissed her words, colored as they were by the typical cynicism of a 16-year-old. "They're just trying to help, honey," I'd said, my hands submerged in the warm, soapy water. "It's their way of showing they care." Clara just dried a plate with a slow, deliberate motion, her silence more potent than any argument. Over the following months, the chasm between her and her grandparents widened. She found excuses to miss the Sunday dinners, a study group, a shift at her part-time bookstore job. When her attendance was unavoidable, she was a model of quiet politeness, her eyes missing nothing. Leo, in contrast, soaked up their attention like a thirsty plant. They took him on fishing trips to the coast, to Blazers games in Portland, to the Sterling family cabin at Black Butte Ranch. My father began to speak of Leo's future as if it were a foregone conclusion. "The Sterling legacy needs a steady hand," he would say, ruffling Leo's hair, his gaze pointedly avoiding mine. A seed of unease began to sprout within me, a tiny, unwelcome weed in the garden of my gratitude. When the embossed invitation for my parents' 40th anniversary arrived, I saw it as a chance for a true reconciliation, a grand public display of our family's resilience. The celebration was to be held at the Willamette View Lodge, a place of rustic elegance, with over 200 guests, a testament to the enduring partnership of Arthur and Beatrice Sterling. I threw myself into the preparations with a fervor born of hope. I couldn't afford a new dress, so I spent evenings carefully altering a deep sapphire blue silk gown from a forgotten corner of my closet, the hum of the sewing machine a quiet prayer. I helped my mother with seating charts and floral arrangements. My personal contribution was a large, hand-thrown ceramic platter, its glaze the color of the Oregon twilight, which I spent weeks perfecting. Clara watched my efforts from the doorway of my garage studio, her expression a mixture of concern and resignation. "Why are you trying so hard, Mom?" she asked one evening, her voice gentle. "They wouldn't do all this for you." "Because we're family, Clara," I replied, my own words a balm to my anxieties. "We show up for each other. That's what it means." The day of the party dawned with a soft, persistent drizzle that gave the air a clean, earthy scent. The sky cleared by late afternoon, leaving the world washed clean and shimmering. I spent an hour convincing Clara to wear a simple, forest green dress her grandmother had sent over. "Just for a few hours," I coaxed. "It would mean so much to her." She finally relented, the color bringing out the serious, thoughtful green of her own eyes. The Willamette View Lodge was breathtaking. Huge timber beams soared overhead, and a wall of windows offered a panoramic view of the river, its surface like hammered silver under the evening sky. Peonies and white roses spilled from massive stone urns, and a string trio played softly in a corner, the notes weaving through the low hum of conversation. My parents stood near the grand stone fireplace, greeting their guests like visiting monarchs. My father, impeccable in his tuxedo, looked every bit the titan of industry. My mother, in a gown of shimmering champagne silk, was radiant. "Lena, darling," she said, her kiss a feather-light brush against my cheek. "You look content." It was a word that managed to be both a compliment and a dismissal. Then her eyes found Clara. "And Clara, that dress is perfect on you." I knew that shade of green would be magnificent. My father's attention was solely for Leo, whom he swept into a hug. "There's my champion. I have a seat for you right at the head table, next to me. We have important people for you to meet." I felt that familiar twinge, the feeling of being slightly out of focus in my own family portrait, but I pushed it down. Tonight was their night. The great hall filled with the faces of my past and present, relatives I saw only at weddings and funerals, my father's business partners, my mother's society friends. I moved through the crowd, a ghost in a blue dress, accepting murmured sympathies about my divorce with a practiced, gentle smile. "It's been a period of adjustment, but we're finding our way. The children are my focus now." "No, I'm not seeing anyone." The evening was unfolding with a carefully managed perfection until I saw them. Standing by the entrance, framed by the massive wooden doors, was Julian, looking more successful than ever in a custom-tailored suit. On his arm was Tessa, her bright, confident smile a stark contrast to the hollow ache in my chest. Her dress, of vibrant crimson, seemed to suck all the other colors from the room. My breath caught. "Did you know they were coming?" I whispered to my sister-in-law, Susan, as she passed with a tray of champagne flutes. Her expression was a portrait of discomfort. "Oh, Lena. I'm so sorry. I thought you knew. Your mother insisted on sending them an invitation." Before the ground could steady itself beneath my feet, My parents were enveloping Julian and Tessa in warm, effusive hugs. My father clapped Julian on the back, a gesture of camaraderie that felt like a physical blow to me. My mother was admiring a diamond bracelet on Tessa's wrist. I stood rooted to the spot, watching this joyful reunion with the man who had shattered my world. When my mother finally met my gaze across the room, she offered a tiny, almost imperceptible shrug. "We must be gracious, dear," she mouthed. "It's about the family." I made my way to the bar, my hand trembling slightly as I accepted a glass of wine. Across the room, I saw Clara standing near a window, away from the crowd. She wasn't looking at the view. Her eyes were fixed on our family, her expression unreadable, her thumbs flying across the screen of her phone. I should have walked over to her then. I should have asked who she was talking to. I should have recognized the quiet alarm bells that were beginning to ring in the back of my mind. Instead, I took a deep swallow of wine and told myself, once again, to simply get through the night. The grand hall of the lodge vibrated with a symphony of celebration. Laughter mingled with the clinking of crystal, and servers moved like silent dancers between the tables. I held my smile in place, a fragile mask, as I watched Julian and Tessa circulate, accepting congratulations on what I now realized was their recent engagement. My cousin, Amelia, squeezed my arm. "You have the patience of a saint, Lena." I'd have accidentally spilled my Pinot Noir on that crimson dress by now. "I'm just trying to keep the peace," I murmured, my eyes scanning the room for my children. Leo was easy to find, a small, proud shadow at my father's side. Arthur rested a possessive hand on his grandson's shoulder, introducing him to a state senator as the future of the Sterling name. It took me a moment longer to find Clara. She was in a quiet alcove, deep in conversation with my great-aunt Elspeth, my grandmother's younger sister. Aunt Elspeth was the family's quiet eccentric, a woman who had chosen a life as a history professor over a place in Port Blossom society. Clara's posture was tense, her hands clasped in front of her as she listened intently. Aunt Elspeth kept glancing around nervously, her brow furrowed with concern. When they saw me approaching, their conversation stopped abruptly. "Everything all right over here?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just catching up with my brilliant grandniece," Elspeth said, her smile a little too bright. "She has such a wonderfully curious mind." Clara's eyes met mine for a fleeting second. "We were just talking about the family archives," she said, her tone flat. Before I could ask more, the gentle chime of a glass being tapped drew everyone's attention. My father stood in the center of the room, a commanding presence. "Beatrice and I are so deeply grateful to have you all here tonight," he began, his voice resonant. He raised his glass to my mother. "40 years ago, I made the single best investment of my life." A wave of polite laughter followed. "A strong partnership," he continued, "is about building something to last. It's about making the hard choices necessary to protect the foundation for the good of the entire structure. Sometimes that means pruning the branches that are weak or growing in the wrong direction to ensure the health of the main tree." His eyes swept the room, pausing on Julian, then Leo, and finally, for a brief, unreadable moment, on me. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the past, but the work we are doing to secure the future. To legacy and to shrewd management." As the guests raised their glasses, a current of confusion seemed to ripple through the room. It was an odd toast for an anniversary. Dinner was a masterpiece of Pacific Northwest cuisine, but the food tasted like ash in my mouth. My unease grew into a knot of cold dread. Clara picked at her salmon, her phone resting in her lap beneath the tablecloth. Leo, however, had been seated between my father and Julian, and the three of them were a self-contained island of animated conversation, their voices dropping to a conspiratorial hush whenever I leaned in. During the dessert course, a decadent chocolate torte with hazelnut cream, I excused myself. In the hallway, I nearly walked straight into Aunt Elspeth. "Oh, Lena, dear," she said, her hand flying to her chest. "I was hoping to catch you alone." "Is something wrong, Elspeth? You and Clara seemed so serious earlier." She glanced down the hall before lowering her voice. "I'm probably just being a foolish old woman, but I've overheard some things tonight. Conversations between your father and Julian. They're talking about business, but it doesn't sound right. What do you mean? They're talking about asset protection, about transferring titles. They mentioned the old Cedar Creek property, and I heard your name, followed by words like unstable and poor judgment. She took my hand, her papery skin surprisingly strong. I know Arthur can be single-minded, but this feels different. Please, just be careful. Just then, my mother appeared at the end of the hall, her smile sharp. There you are, Elspeth. The photographer is waiting for a picture of the sisters. With a final, worried squeeze of my hand, Elspeth hurried away, leaving me enveloped in a growing fog of apprehension. When I returned to my table, Clara was gone. Leo was on Julian's lap now, the two of them laughing at something on Julian's phone. My mother stood beside them, her smile one of pure, unadulterated approval, a smile I hadn't received in years. Where's Clara? I asked my mother. Oh, that girl, she sighed, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. So dramatic these days. She said she needed some air on the terrace. I found her outside, standing with her back to the party, the cool night air pulling at the tendrils of her hair. She was on the phone, her voice low and intense. I understand. So, the transfer would have to be signed by, okay? And that's legally enforceable. She saw me and her voice faltered. She ended the call quickly. Mom. Enjoying the view. Who is that, Clara? Just a friend from school, she said, pocketing her phone. We're working on a project for our civics class. She turned to face me, the party's golden light illuminating her serious expression. Have you noticed how much time Grandpa is spending with Julian? It's like you're not even here. It's business, honey. It's always business with them. Even as I said it, the words felt hollow and untrue. Clara studied my face, her gaze unnervingly direct. Mom, have you ever really thought about why Grandpa keeps all the family legal files in his study at home? The deeds, the trust documents, everything. What are you talking about? How would you know what's in his study? She took a deep breath. A few weeks ago, when we were there for dinner, I had a huge history paper to finish. Grandma said I could work in Grandpa's study because he was out for the evening. She said he wouldn't mind. Her eyes, so like my own, held my gaze. There were papers on his desk, Mom. A whole file. It had your name on it. And Julian's. There were colored tabs sticking out everywhere, marking sections about asset reallocation and custodial fitness. The cool night air suddenly felt frigid. Clara, you shouldn't have been looking at his private papers. Even if they're about us? Her voice was laced with a frustration that was close to despair. Why is that the first thing you're worried about? Before I could form a response, the doors to the terrace slid open. Servers were moving out to a small stage, preparing for the cake-cutting ceremony. Clara gave me one last, long look. Just watch them, Mom. Please. Watch how they act together. For the next hour, I did exactly that. I became an observer in my own life, and the scene that unfolded was terrifyingly clear. I saw my father's hand on Julian's back, guiding him toward a cluster of influential lawyers. I saw my mother showing Tessa a sapphire necklace, my grandmother's necklace, the one that had been promised to me. I saw the easy, familiar way Julian fit into my parents' orbit, as if the last 2 years of pain and upheaval had never occurred. The most chilling part was the photography. The photographer was constantly arranging group shots, and in almost every one, they placed Leo between my father and Julian. A visual tableau of the Sterling succession, with me and my daughter standing on the periphery, or more often, not included at all. Then came the slideshow, projected onto a large screen. The title slide read, Sterling, a legacy of 40 years. As the images flashed by, a sickening pattern emerged. My brother, Michael, and his family were featured prominently. Julian appeared in dozens of photos, including many recent ones. Leo was a star, but I was a footnote. A few photos from my childhood, one from my wedding, and then nothing. It was a deliberate, curated erasure. I risked a glance at Clara. She wasn't watching the screen. She was watching me, her expression full of a sad, knowing empathy. She had seen this long before I had allowed myself to. As the slideshow ended to a round of applause, my father took the microphone once more. And now, before we cut this magnificent cake, Beatrice and I have one more special announcement to make. He beckoned for Julian and Leo to join him at the front. The continuity of family has always been our highest priority. And so, we are taking steps to ensure that the Sterling traditions and assets remain in strong, capable hands for generations to come. I felt Clara's hand find mine under the table, her grip surprisingly strong. In the weeks ahead, my father continued, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on me with an expression of something that looked unnervingly like pity. We will be finalizing the legal arrangements to secure our family's legacy. Sometimes, the most loving thing a parent can do is make the hard decisions for a child who may not, at the moment, be able to see what is truly in their own best interest. A low murmur spread through the room. Suddenly, Clara stood up. "I need to use the restroom," she whispered, her voice tight, and slipped away into the crowd before I could say a word. For the next 20 minutes, I sat in a state of suspended animation, a cold dread coiling in my stomach. Well-meaning guests stopped by the table to chat, and I responded with mechanical nods and smiles, my mind elsewhere. When Clara finally returned, her face was pale, her jaw set with a new determination. She leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear. "Mom," she whispered, her voice urgent and low. "We have to leave. Right now." "Clara, we can't just walk out," I hissed back, acutely aware of the people at the next table. "It's their anniversary. Leo is having a wonderful time." Her eyes, a deep forest green, flashed with an intensity one had never seen before. "Mom, trust me. Please. We have to go." "Did something happen? Are you sick?" "I will explain everything in the car. Everything. But we can't be here when they make that announcement." She glanced nervously toward a table where my father's attorney, Mr. Davies, was watching us with keen interest. "Please, Mom. For once in your life, just trust my gut instead of worrying about making a scene." The raw desperation in her voice finally broke through my lifelong conditioning to be polite, to be accommodating, to be the good daughter. Clara was not dramatic. She was the most level-headed person I knew. If she was this afraid, I needed to listen. "Okay," I breathed. "Let me just get Leo and say a quick goodbye." "Be fast," she urged. "And whatever you do, don't let Grandpa talk you out of it." I navigated the tables, feeling 100 pairs of eyes on me. My mother intercepted me before I reached Leo. "Leaving already?" Her smile was a perfect, sharp crescent. "But the evening is just getting started, darling." "Clara doesn't feel well," I said, the lie feeling flimsy on my tongue. "I need to take her home." "Oh, for heaven's sake. Send her home with Michael. You and Leo should stay. There are important family matters to be discussed." The chill I felt had nothing to do with the night air. "What matters?" "Just arrangements," she said, patting my arm in a gesture that was meant to be soothing, but felt utterly condescending. "Your father has it all under control." "That's what I'm afraid of," I said quietly, moving past her to where Leo was showing his cousins a new game on his tablet. He protested, of course. "But Grandpa said there's a special surprise for me later." "We'll find out about the surprise tomorrow," I promised, my voice strained as I avoided my father's thunderous gaze from across the room. Just as we reached the main doors, Julian appeared, blocking our path. "Leaving so soon, Lena? The night is young." His cologne, a scent I once associated with love, now smelled of deceit. "Your father and I were hoping to chat with you about some new plans for Leo's education trust." "Some other time, Julian," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. I noted he said Leo's trust, not the children's. "Don't be difficult," he said, his voice dropping. "This is for the best. Your parents are just trying to secure Leo's future, since you're obviously not in a position to." His gaze flickered over my restored dress, a subtle but unmistakable judgment. Clara stepped forward, placing herself between me and Julian. "We're leaving," she said, her voice clear and steady with an authority that stunned us both. "Leo, take Mom's hand." As we pushed through the heavy doors, a fragment of conversation from a group of my father's associates reached me. "Deed transfer on the Cedar Creek property is the easiest part. Custody hearing will be a formality with our evidence. Keeping the assets in the direct line, smart move. My father caught us in the circular driveway, his face a mask of practiced concern. Lena, this is a deeply embarrassing spectacle. We have guests. We have announcements. I'm sorry, Dad. Clara is ill. He barely glanced at her. Then leave her with the staff to call a cab. You and Leo need to be inside for the family business. The way he said family business, the utter dismissal of my daughter, was the final piece of the puzzle. For the first time, my own instincts screamed louder than my fear of his disapproval. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. We are all leaving. Whatever it is can wait. His face hardened, the mask of concern dropping to reveal the cold granite beneath. This is precisely the kind of emotional, irresponsible behavior that forced our hand. Julian would never allow sentiment to interfere with his obligations. Julian allowed his sentiment to interfere with our marriage. I shot back, a spark of long dormant fire igniting within me. And yet, he's the one you trust with our family's future. My father stepped closer, his voice a low, menacing rumble. We are trying to protect the family legacy from your poor decisions. If you would just cooperate, this could all be handled with dignity. What exactly is this? I demanded. He straightened up as another couple exited the lodge, his public face snapping back into place. We can discuss it when you're capable of being rational. Julian and I have a plan that is in everyone's best interest. Especially Leo's. Mom, Clara whispered, her hand tugging on my sleeve. Now, please. I looked from my father's cold, resolute face to my daughter's, which was filled with a fierce, protective fear. Whatever she had found, whatever she knew, it was real. In that moment, the choice was finally, devastatingly clear. I turned my back on my father, took my children's hands, and walked away from the golden light of the lodge into the vast, uncertain darkness of the night. My family was broken, and for the first time, I felt ready to find out why. The interior of my old sedan felt like a sanctuary as we drove away from the lodge. The silence was thick and heavy, punctuated only by Leo's soft sighs as he finally drifted off to sleep in the back, clutching a small box of party favors. Clara sat beside me, a silent statue, her gaze fixed on the winding road as it descended toward the distant lights of Port Blossom. Are you going to tell me what that was all about? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, careful not to wake Leo. She glanced into the back seat. Not in the car. He doesn't need to hear any of this. I respected her wisdom, a quiet acknowledgement that the roles between us were shifting. We drove for 15 minutes, the tension in the car a palpable thing, until we reached a scenic viewpoint overlooking the city. I pulled into the empty lot and turned off the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the frantic beating of my heart. The soft glow of the dashboard lights illuminated the resolve on Clara's face. I've known something was wrong for months, Mom, she began, her voice steady but quiet. The way they talk about you when they think I can't hear. The way they've been grooming Leo. But I kept telling myself I was being a dramatic teenager. She unlocked her phone. First, you need to know who I was texting tonight. It was Aunt Kate. The name landed with the force of a physical shock. Catherine Sterling, my father's younger sister, was the family ghost. She had been exiled nearly 20 years ago after a fiery dispute over our grandparents' will. My father's narrative was that Kate was greedy and emotionally unstable. We hadn't seen or spoken to her since I was in high school. Aunt Kate? How? I found her online a few months ago, Clara explained. She's a professor at a university in Colorado. I reached out because she hesitated, searching for the right words. Because the stories Dad used to tell about her started sounding a lot like the way he talks about you now. She handed me the phone. I scrolled through a long thread of messages, a secret correspondence that chronicled my daughter's growing fears. Kate's words were cautious but clear, warning Clara to watch for the signs, an unusual focus on finances, attempts to drive a wedge between me and the children, the use of a public family event to create a narrative. My heart ached as I read my daughter's replies, her observations becoming more and more specific, more and more alarmed. That's why I was watching so closely, Clara continued, her voice trembling slightly. But today I found proof. When I went to the restroom, I didn't go to the restroom. I went back to Grandpa's study at the lodge. He has a private office there. Clara, you can't just. Mom, they're trying to take everything from you, she interrupted, her eyes filling with tears. When I was heading to the bathroom earlier, I heard them. Grandpa, Grandma, and Julian in the library. They were talking about you. Grandma said it was a shame, but your artistic temperament made you an unreliable steward of the family assets. Grandpa said this was the only way to protect Leo's birthright. They were so calm about it. That's when I knew I had to see the documents for myself. She took back her phone and swiped to her photo gallery. I took pictures. My blood ran cold as I looked at the images. There were legal documents, drafts of motions to be filed. A petition to modify custody of Leo, citing my financial instability and erratic lifestyle. A proposal to transfer the deed of the Cedar Creek property, the small, historic cottage and 10 acres my grandmother had left specifically to me in her will, into a trust managed by my father and Julian for the sole benefit of Leo Sterling. My name was everywhere, next to clauses about parental fitness, emotional liability, and mismanagement of funds. My father's neat, architectural handwriting filled the margins with notes. Emphasize L's preference for time with father, leverage new engagement as sign of stability. EC will support our assessment. EC, Elspeth's initial. Had they tried to pull her in too? There's one more thing, Clara said, her voice barely audible. She played an audio file. I recognized the hushed, conspiratorial tones of the library. My father's voice was clear. Nathan understands what's needed to maintain the Wallace name. Brooke has always been too emotional, too independent. This divorce actually gives us the opportunity we needed to restructure things properly. Julian's voice responded, smooth as silk. I appreciate your trust, Arthur. Once the house and the Cedar Creek property are secured in the trust for Leo, we can ensure everything is maintained to the family standard. Lena would probably just sell it all to fund a trip to Bali. Then my mother's voice, the sound that had soothed me to sleep as a child, now sharp as broken glass. We've always known Lena lacked practical judgment. It's a relief, frankly, that you've remained so close, Julian. You're the son we can count on. The recording went on, a blueprint for the dismantling of my life. They planned to use their wealth and influence to paint me as an unfit mother, to take my son, to steal my inheritance, all under the guise of protecting the family. And my daughter, Clara, was dismissed in a single sentence from my mother. The girl is too much like her mother, I'm afraid. Headstrong. They've been saying things to Leo, Clara whispered. Grandma told him that if he lived with Dad and Tessa, he'd have his own pony at their new house. That you can't give him the life he deserves. The betrayal was a physical weight, pressing the air from my lungs. It was all a lie. The support, the Sunday dinners, the concern, it was all a calculated performance, a strategy to gather evidence against me. I couldn't let you sit there and listen to them announce it, Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. Aunt Kate told me that's Grandpa's signature move. He creates a public spectacle so that if you react, you look like the hysterical, unstable person he's been claiming you are. I reached across the console and took her hand. It was trembling. Thank you, I whispered, my own voice breaking. Thank you for seeing what I refused to see. Thank you for being so brave. She squeezed my hand back, a tear finally tracing a path down her pale cheek. I was so scared you wouldn't believe me. You always want to believe the best of them. I believe you, I said, the words a vow. I started the car, my hands shaking, but my purpose clear. Let's go home. And tomorrow, we figure out how to fight back. As we drove through the sleeping city, I felt a profound and painful clarity. For my entire life, I had been trying to earn a love that was never truly unconditional. My daughter, in one terrifying, clarifying night, had not saved me from my family. She had saved me from my own lifelong illusion of it. And she had given me back to myself. The hours before dawn were a blur of quiet activity and raw emotion. After I carried a sleeping Leo to his bed, Clara and I sat at our small kitchen table, the damning evidence glowing on her phone screen. We were a two-person war council, mapping out the betrayal. Sometime after 2 a.m., exhaustion finally claimed her. I found her asleep on the sofa, her phone fallen to the floor beside her. I covered her with an afghan my grandmother had knitted years ago, a wave of fierce, protective love washing over me. This child, this incredible young woman, had shouldered a burden that should never have been hers. Alone in the stillness, I opened my laptop. Fueled by coffee and a cold, burning anger, I began my own reconnaissance. I logged into an old, shared email account Julian and I had used for household bills. He'd never bothered to change the password. In a drafts folder, I found his notes to himself, a timeline of his discussions with my father. AS confirms Lena unlikely to contest financial review. B. Sterling gathering anecdotes for custody petition. Anniversary announcement will solidify public perception. The calculated cruelty of it stole my breath. At 4 a.m., my fingers hovering over the keyboard, I found Aunt Kate's university email address. I wrote a short, simple message. Aunt Kate, it's Lena Vance. Clara was right about everything. I need your help. Her reply came in less than 10 minutes. I've been waiting for this email for 20 years, Lena. Call me. I'm awake. We spoke for nearly 2 hours, the years of silence dissolving in a flood of shared experience. Her story was a haunting echo of my own. My father had used her divorce as leverage, painting her new partner as unsuitable, her career choice as irresponsible. He had systematically isolated her from the family and then, at a large family Christmas gathering, announced that our grandparents' estate had been restructured, effectively cutting her out of a significant inheritance that was rightfully hers. He can't stand it when one of his assets shows independent thought, Kate said, her voice raspy but kind. He sees the family as a corporation, and he is the CEO. When you divorced Julian, you weren't just ending a marriage, you were breaking a business contract. You became a liability. Why didn't you ever warn me? I whispered, the shame of my own blindness washing over me. Oh, Lena, I tried. But you were so young, so eager for his approval. You were marrying the man he had chosen for you. You believed in the illusion because you needed to. I couldn't be the one to shatter it for you. Her words were a painful truth. I'm so sorry, Kate. I should have listened to you. What matters is that you're listening now, she replied gently. And you have Clara. My God, that child has a spine of steel. She didn't let him break her spirit. Before we hung up, she gave me the name of a lawyer in Portland. Anya Sharma. She's a dragon. And Lena? Don't you sign a single thing. At sunrise, I called my brother, Michael. He was always the diplomat, the one who kept his head down to stay in our father's good graces. He listened in silence as I laid out the facts. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I've heard them talking, he finally admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. Dad and Julian. About the Cedar Creek property. Dad said it was just an estate planning strategy. To minimize taxes. And you believed him? Another silence. I didn't want to believe anything else, he confessed. Lena, I'm so sorry. His apology felt like a distant echo, a sound from a world I no longer inhabited. Later that morning, with Clara sitting beside me, a silent pillar of support, I called my parents. My mother answered, her voice like ice. Your behavior last night was appalling, Lena. Your father and I are deeply hurt. Put Dad on the phone, I said, my voice devoid of the pleading tone it usually carried. I need you both to hear this. My father came on the line, his voice booming with indignation. I trust you are calling to apologize for the scene you created. No, I said calmly. I'm calling about the custody petition, the plan to transfer the Cedar Creek property, and the trust you're creating with my ex-husband to disinherit me. The silence on the other end was absolute. It was the most honest communication I had ever had with them. Those are private family matters, my father finally said, his voice dangerously low. They are my matters, I corrected him. They involve my children and my future. A future you have been actively trying to dismantle. An inheritance is a gift, not a right, my mother interjected, her voice sharp. We have a duty to protect the family legacy. By taking my son? By erasing my daughter. Don't be hysterical, my father snapped. This is exactly the emotionalism that proves our point. Is that what you told everyone about Aunt Kate too? I asked. The question hung in the air, a sword severing the last thread of their denial. I've spoken with her. And with Michael. I know the playbook, Dad. And this time, it's not going to work. You spoke with that woman? My mother gasped. That's enough, I said, my voice steady and clear. I have retained an attorney. Her name is Anya Sharma. From this point forward, all communication will go through her. Tell Julian the same. You are making the biggest mistake of your life, my father warned. No, Dad, I said, a profound and sorrowful peace settling over me. I'm correcting the biggest mistake of my life, which was believing that your love wasn't conditional. The mistake was mine. But it stops now. I ended the call and looked at Clara. Her eyes were shining with tears, but she was smiling. What now? She asked. I pulled her into a fierce hug, breathing in the scent of her hair, drawing on her incredible strength. Now, I said, we learned to build our own walls. And our own doors. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in dismantling a life built on sand and rebuilding it on solid ground. Anya Sharma was everything Aunt Kate had promised, sharp, empathetic, and utterly unintimidated by the Sterling name. Her office, in a restored brick building in Portland's Pearl District, felt like a safe harbor. What they've done is a classic case of financial and emotional coercion, she explained after reviewing Clara's evidence. The good news is, they wrote it all down. They were so confident in their power that they got sloppy. We moved quickly. Anya filed an injunction to block any transfer of property and a motion to dismiss any potential custody challenges, using their own documented words to demonstrate their intent to use Leo as a pawn. The most challenging part was helping Leo. We began seeing a family therapist, a kind, gentle woman who gave him a space to voice his confusion. Grandpa says Dad has a bigger house for me, he said one day, his small face clouded with worry. He says I could have a dog there. You are loved in both your homes, sweet boy, I told him, my heart aching. And no one's love is bigger or smaller than anyone else's. It's just different. Clara, freed from the burden of her secret, began to flourish. She and Aunt Kate developed a deep bond, corresponding regularly through emails and video calls. Kate became our strategist and our cheerleader, a voice of reason and experience from her home in Colorado. She flew out to visit one weekend, and watching her and Clara talk, two strong, perceptive women from different generations, both of whom had refused to bow to my father's will, was a profoundly healing experience. My pottery became my therapy. In the quiet of my garage studio, I would take a lump of cold, formless clay and, with patience and pressure, shape it into something of beauty and purpose. I was doing the same with my life. The turning point came 3 months after the party. Anya called. Julian wanted to meet, without lawyers. He's feeling the heat, Anya said. His fiancé's family is apparently old Portland society, and they are not pleased with the optics of this impending family war. They value discretion above all else. I met him at a neutral coffee shop. He looked tired, the confident swagger replaced by a weary defensiveness. This has all gotten out of hand, Lena, he began. It was out of hand the moment you conspired with my parents to take my son and my land, Julian. He had the grace to flush. They approached me. They were worried. And you saw an opportunity, I finished for him. I laid out my terms, my voice even and calm. He would withdraw from all agreements with my father, support the dismissal of any custody claims, and sign a document legally acknowledging the Cedar Creek property as my sole and separate inheritance. In return, I would not pursue further legal action against him for conspiracy. Why are you doing this? I asked, genuinely curious. He stared into his coffee cup. Tessa, her family believes in clean slates. They find this all very messy. So, it wasn't conscience, but convenience. It didn't matter. A win was a win. 6 months after the anniversary party, we all gathered in Anya Sharma's conference room. The air was thick with unspoken resentments. My parents sat on one side of the long, polished table, their lawyer between them. I sat on the other, with Anya and, at my insistence, Aunt Kate. At the head of the table, arranging her files, was Clara. I object to Catherine's presence, my father began, his voice a low growl. Aunt Kate is here as my support, I said simply. and as a material witness to your patterns of behavior, should this proceed to court. My mother began to weep softly into a handkerchief. I don't know how we got here. We only ever wanted to protect this family. You don't protect a family by trying to amputate parts of it, I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of my newfound conviction. The meeting was a slow, painful extraction of concessions. Anya methodically presented the evidence, not with anger, but with an irrefutable, factual clarity that left my parents' arguments in tatters. By the end of the day, a new agreement was drafted and signed. It affirmed my inheritance, established equal trusts for both my children to be managed by a neutral third party, and laid out a plan for supervised grandparent visitation, contingent on their participation in family counseling. As we packed our briefcases, my father looked at me, his eyes full of a baffled rage. I hope this victory was worth it, Lena. You've destroyed this family. Clara, who had been silent for hours, looked up from her folder. She met my father's gaze directly. Grandpa, she said, her voice clear and without malice, you didn't build a family. You built a company. And you tried to fire Mom and me. This isn't a victory. It's just our severance package. The truth of her words hung in the silent room, devastating and absolute. A year has passed. Life is different now. It is smaller, quieter, and infinitely more real. With my inheritance secure, I sold the Cedar Creek cottage and used the funds to buy a modest, but lovely bungalow with a large, sunlit room that is now my professional studio. My pottery business, Vance Clayworks, is thriving. I have found a quiet joy in creating a life and a living with my own two hands. The relationship with my parents is a fragile, tentative thing. We see them every few weeks, with a therapist present to help us navigate the minefield of our history. They are learning, slowly and painfully, that my love is no longer something they can control or command. My father is learning the language of boundaries. My mother is learning the difference between concern and control. I don't know if our relationship will ever be what it once was, but I am beginning to realize that may be a good thing. What we are building now, however fragile, is at least honest. One evening, not long ago, Clara and I were sitting on our new front porch, watching the last light fade from the sky. Do you ever miss it? She asked. The big house, all of it? I thought for a moment, listening to the sound of Leo laughing as he chased fireflies in the yard. I miss the illusion of it sometimes, I admitted. The feeling of safety, even if it wasn't real. But I wouldn't trade this for it. Not for anything. I looked at my daughter, her face illuminated in the soft glow of twilight. She was no longer just my child. She was my hero, my compass, the one who had the courage to show me the truth. She taught me that sometimes the most profound act of love is not holding on, but letting go of expectations, of illusions, of the need for an approval that costs you your own soul. She taught me that family is not just a legacy you inherit, but a sanctuary you build, day by day, with truth, respect, and a love that is strong enough to weather any storm. And for that lesson, I will be forever grateful.